Welcome to Combating CSC, a solution-focused approach. My name is Bernadette Gruber, and I'm with the Protect Arizona Children's Coalition. I am a wife and a mother. I have 4 wonderful children ranging from 19 to 24 years old. I have been involved in education in various capacities for the last 15 years. My involvement in the area of sex education began when I was appointed to the TUSD Sex Ed Advisory Committee, where I served for 4 years. Today we are going to talk about sex education. But first, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Protect Arizona Children's Coalition. We work to protect the health and innocence of children. We are also for parental rights. Parents, not the government, not the schools, possess the fundamental constitutional right to direct the upbringing and education of their children. Our efforts are to protect those rights. Today we will be covering what is comprehensive sexuality education, also known as CSE, who's behind it, what is happening here in Tucson, along with practical ways to combat CSC, and then we will end with frequently asked questions. Sex education is no longer the birds and the bees. Well-funded national and international organizations like Planned Parenthood and SECUS have been pushing what they call comprehensive sexuality education in our schools. Comprehensive sexuality education is much more than sex education. It is designed to change the sexual and gender norms of society by raising the rising generation in radical gender ideologies. It promotes high-risk sexual behaviors to children and encourages even the youngest of children to experiment sexually while ignoring the research showing negative outcomes for sexually active children. To show you how serious they are about changing society, the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States, or SECUS, founded by a Planned Parenthood medical director, promotes CSC as a powerful tool for social change. They have even changed their logo to reflect their intent. As you can see, prominently displayed in their logo is the phrase, Sex Ed for Social Change. Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider, is also pushing comprehensive sexuality education in our public school classrooms. They are the single largest provider of comprehensive sexuality education in the United States. And so what does Planned Parenthood teach? Monica Klein was a former sex education educator for Planned Parenthood for over 10 years. She explains how CSE sexualizes children.
So part of comprehensive sex education and risk reduction is to also teach them how pleasurable it is to use these types of things, condoms and lubrication. And it also means that we need to role play different ways that you can talk to your partner and convince them to use condoms and lubrication. And we're also taught that when we see a sea of people and teenagers, assume that they're doing everything. Don't ask them what they're doing, just assume that they're already doing it, which would include vaginal, anal, and oral sex. So we are to speak candidly to those teenagers about all forms of sex and how condoms and lubrication can help them, giving them a false message that they're going to be protected. I wasn't comfortable with doing this, and so, but I was being taught by my leaders in the community, these experts at Planned Parenthood, that this was the only way, that there was no way that we could convince people not to have sex. There was no way we were going to convince children and adults not to have sex. So we just have to give them the resources, even if their parents don't want them to have it. Because what they told me is parents are a barrier to service. Once the parents know that this is happening, we'll never see them in the clinic again.
As Monica Klein explained, CSE sexualizes children rather than encouraging them to delay sexual activity until adulthood or marriage. CSE normalizes high-risk behavior, and CSE programs teach children to consent to sex. Now, I want to unpack consent for a moment. I think there is a lot of confusion regarding consent. By definition, consent means to give permission for something to happen or be done. So contrary to what some people may think, teaching consent is not about teaching how to say yes or no to sex. It's really only about how to say yes to sex. Planned Parenthood understands this and teaches that consent is an agreement to participate in sexual activity. Remember when Monica Klein talked about role plays? Well, they do role plays to practice how to ask for sex or how to ask for consent. In many states, including the state of Arizona, it is illegal for a minor under the age of 18 to consent to sex. It is a felony in the state of Arizona. CC programs also undermine parental rights. Here is an example from Reducing the Risk found in multiple Arizona school districts. It states, "You don't need a parent's permission to get birth control at a clinic. No one needs to know you're going to a clinic." I find it interesting that the school nurse cannot give your child an aspirin without parental permission, but it doesn't seem to matter when it comes to birth control. CC programs promote gender confusion. The biggest change in sex education today is that it's now saturated with LGBTQ sexuality. Marriage, sex, gender, and sexuality are the subjects of profound debate in the culture and the courts. Yet many school districts have effectively chosen sides on these issues and are using sex education as the vehicle to enforce conformity with their views. Some school districts, like TUSD, have created their own CSE programs that are just as harmful. This is an excerpt from the Tucson Unified School District High School Lesson Number 4. It teaches students that their sex, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation are all fluid or on a spectrum. Then they ask the students to plot themselves on this identity continuum. This is not medically or scientifically accurate and plants seeds of doubt and confusion in the minds of impressionable students. According to the DSM-5, as many as 98% of gender-confused youth accept their biological sex after naturally passing through puberty. Unfortunately, this fact is not mentioned in CSE curriculum. In addition, there is an increasing number of people who identify as transgender who regret transitioning and are now detransitioning. I find it interesting that Planned Parenthood is the largest provider of comprehensive sexuality education, and these CSE programs push transgender ideology, and now Planned Parenthood is one of the largest providers of transgender hormone therapy in the country. Now, I'd like to make an important clarification here. We are for all students, and that includes straight students and LGBTQ students. Students experiencing gender confusion deserve compassion and should be treated with respect. No child who identifies as transgender should be bullied or mistreated. With that said, the concern is that the affirmative approach, meaning affirming a child in whatever he or she self-identifies as, puts children at a risk of sending them down a path towards untested hormone therapies and mutilating surgeries for what in many cases is a psychological issue. So what is happening in Tucson? Starting back in 2016, Planned Parenthood targeted the Tucson Unified School District, which is the second largest school district in the state. At first, Planned Parenthood showed up at school board meetings demanding CSE, and at that time, the FLASH curriculum. But parents showed up and pushed back. So then over the next 4 years, TUSD worked on creating their own CSE curriculum. Parents continued to push back. Many found the curriculum offensive to their culture. However, on May 12th of 2020, under a stay-at-home order by the governor, by a virtual Zoom meeting, the TUSD school board passed their new CSE curriculum. The 60-day review period required for all new curriculum was violated. Back in 2015, the Sunnyside Unified School District partnered with Planned Parenthood and created a coalition along with Teen Outreach Pregnancy Services and Child and Family Resources. They called themselves the Tucson Teen Pregnancy Prevention Coalition. They were awarded a $4.3 million federal grant over 5 years to implement Planned Parenthood CSE curriculum across their district. As you can see, they are using Making a Difference in middle school and Reducing the Risk in high school. A parent in the Sunnyside School District shared that his son came home from school very upset. When the dad asked him what had happened, his 6th grader said, "They taught us how to masturbate at school, and now I can't stop thinking about it." Planned Parenthood was also pushing their flagship curriculum created by Advocates for Youth in the Sunnyside Unified School District called 3 Rs, or Rights, Respect, Responsibility. Advocates for Youth, just so you know, is basically the youth arm of Planned Parenthood. To make the curriculum gender inclusive, they provided the following instruction for all of the lessons starting in grade 6. It states, you may notice the language throughout the curriculum that seems less familiar using pronouns they instead of him or her. Then they go on to instruct teachers to use gender-neutral names in scenarios and role plays by referring to someone with a vulva versus a girl or a woman. What has Advocates for Youth been up to during the pandemic? Well, they are busy recruiting youth 14 through 24 years old to receive training, support, and stipends to organize reproductive justice in our community. Just so you know, reproductive justice is code word for abortion. So they are training and paying youth to become activists for abortion. Now on to the good news. The good news is that you are the first line of defense. According to the National Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy, teenagers report that the person who influenced them the most in their decision about having sex were parents. As parents, we need to talk to our children about this topic, and not about the graphic things, but about our expectations. Your sons and daughters want to hear from you, even if they don't act like it. We will spend the remainder of our time focusing on practical ways we can combat CSC in our community. First, it's important that you know your parental rights. It's also important to educate yourself on what's happening at your school and in your district. To take legal action when necessary, advocate for healthy curriculum, and be an informed voter. As I mentioned in the beginning, but it's worth repeating, parents, not the school or the government, possess the fundamental constitutional right to direct the upbringing and education of their children. Every Arizona parent should be aware of the extensive parental rights that they have that are protected in state law, and their ability to freely exercise them. Thankfully, in the state of Arizona, parents have a wide range of educational options to choose from, be it traditional public school, public charter school, private Christian school, homeschool, microschool, or virtual learning. Parents are in the driver's seat to choose the best learning environment that fits with their child's needs and their family's values. In public school, and really in all schools, parents can access and review any material, which includes books, videos, and any other items used for instruction. Parents can opt out of any material that the parent would deem harmful or questions beliefs or practices in sex, morality, or religion. Parents across the country and around the world are exercising their rights and pulling their children out of school. In this article from California, where parents are protesting CSC by pulling their kids from public school. In the UK, a school suspended their LBGT lessons after 80% of the students were kept home from school by parents. In the state of Arizona, sex education is not mandatory, so school districts do not have to teach sex education. But if they do, they must notify parents in advance and must obtain written parental permission for children to participate in sex education. They cannot teach your child formal sex education without your written consent. So you have the right to, and we strongly recommend that you review all of the material before you give written permission. Do not just go by the outline that the school provides about the subjects being taught. We have seen transgender ideology hidden in lessons on hygiene. Parents, you need to be aware that these topics are being taught in other subjects like language arts, history, and science. According to the Arizona State Statute 15-102, the school must notify parents in advance, and parents have the option to opt their child out of that instruction. If not, the child will be taught sexuality in that particular subject. As you can see, there are several laws that protect parental rights. This is a new law that will help parents know what their rights are and in the education of their children in public school. The law requires each school district and charter school in the state to prominently post on a publicly accessible portion of its website a link to the statutory handbook of parental rights. Remember, Planned Parenthood considers parents a barrier to service, so it's important that parents and community members are educated on what is being taught and who has access to their children. Educate yourself and examine the curriculum being used in your school district. You can do this by simply asking to see a copy, or you can file a request for public record. This is an example of the form found on the Deer Valley School District website. Last year, Planned Parenthood opened 50 clinics in Los Angeles high schools. Be aware that their goal is to have clinics in every school across the country. Involved and informed parents and community members can keep that from happening. This parent was shocked to learn it's perfectly normal depicting cartoon images of people engaging in various sex acts was found in the elementary school library. She showed up at a school board meeting and handed out copies of the graphic material to each school board member, making them aware this book was in the elementary school libraries. The board immediately voted to remove the book from their libraries. This is the difference one informed parent or community member can make. This is a helpful resource to educate yourself. It's called Responding to the Transgender Issue. You can download your free copy at genderresourceguide.com. On the left is a 23-year-old woman who is suing the gender clinic in London for rushing her through her decision to transition to a male as a teenager. Also, the UK is banning doctors from prescribing puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones to children who are younger than 18 years old. That would be wise for us to do here as well. If you feel your rights or your children's rights have been violated, you can pursue legal action. Below are a few entities who may take your case on pro bono. Alliance Defending Freedom, or ADF, Liberty Counsel, Goldwater Institute, and Child and Parent Rights Campaign. Those in favor of CSE claim that it is medically accurate and evidence-based. Let's see if that is true. The Institute for Research and Evaluation is a nationally recognized independent research and evaluation company researching the efficacy of school-based comprehensive sexuality education for over 25 years. In their latest report, published in 2019, they evaluated 60 different comprehensive sexuality education evaluation studies. And they found that CSE programs had an 87% failure rate in achieving their stated goals of decreasing teen pregnancy, decreasing STDs or STIs, and increasing condom use. By now you're probably wondering, is there any good sex education alternatives to CSE? The good news is, yes, there are. One of the ways that you can combat CSE is to advocate for healthy curriculum. In spite of all the bad news around sex education these days, parents need to remember that currently the sex education curriculum choice is left up to the school district, which means parents and community members can advocate for healthy curriculum to be taught in schools rather than CSE. There are good sex education programs in use today. Choosing the Best and Heritage Keepers are two such examples of sexual risk avoidance curriculum, or SRA, that positively emphasizes delaying sex until marriage, making healthy choices, and providing medically accurate information on contraceptive failure rates. Choosing the Best is being taught in the Chandler Unified School District, and Heritage Keepers is a curriculum that qualifies for federal grant dollars. So any school or nonprofit, including a church, can apply for a grant to teach Heritage Keepers. Locally, Hands of Hope has a parent program called Why Wait to help parents have consistent conversations with their children. They provide videos, resources, and conversation starters to assist parents to engage in this area. Ways to combat CSE is to know your rights, educate yourself on what is being taught, take legal action when necessary, advocate for healthy curriculum, and be an informed voter. This is actual legislation that was proposed in the 2020 legislative session. Notice if it would have passed, it would have mandated CSE taught to all Arizona children starting in kindergarten. It would have emphasized LGBTQ rights and affirmative consent. Thankfully, this bill did not pass, but I guarantee you they will try again next session. That is why it is so important to be an informed voter and know what each candidate believes and what they stand for. You can find out about a candidate by Googling their name to see what information or articles come up, view their campaign page, examine who or what organizations endorse them or financially contribute to their campaign, and visit their social media pages. For example, I was on the TUSD Sex Ed Advisory Committee with 5 other people. 3 of them are running for office. I learned all this information from their social media pages. At top, it is Adam Reagan. He's running for TUSD School Board, and he's endorsed by Planned Parenthood. At the bottom left is Ravi Gravashaw, and he is running for TUSD School Board as well, and he is endorsed by the LGBTQ Fund. And at the right is Stephanie Hamilton, and she's running for LD10 State House of Representatives. She is backed and endorsed by the Arizona List. And just so you know, the Arizona List is a political action committee whose sole purpose is to get pro-abortion, progressive women into office. This is the Planned Parenthood of Arizona page listing who they have endorsed for elected positions and what they stand for. A great resource is Center for Arizona Policy Free Voter Guide to help vet each elected official. You can obtain a voter guide at azvoterguide.com. After the primary, they will have a voter guide for school board candidates. Remember, when you vote, vote the whole ballot. Only 17% of Americans vote the whole ballot. But as you can see, school board candidates are just as important as a Senate seat. Lastly, but definitely not least, remember to pray. Romans 12:12 reminds us to rejoice in our confident hope, be patient in trouble, and keep on praying. Now I would like to move on to frequently asked questions. A common question we receive is, isn't sex education supposed to focus on abstinence? Well, the answer is yes. Regulation R7-2-303 governs sex education in Arizona. It requires that sex education curriculum stress that students abstain from sexual intercourse until they are mature adults, and that the curriculum must emphasize that abstinence is the only 100% effective method to avoid pregnancy. All that is good. However, what you'll find is that CSE programs don't teach about abstinence. They don't teach about the numerous benefits of delaying sexual activity, such as teens who choose to avoid sex have higher grades and are more likely to go on to higher institutions of learning and are healthier. They also don't teach the fact that a majority of teens are not having sex, and almost half the teens who have had sex wish they would have waited. Instead, they make that one statement that abstinence is the only 100% effective method to avoid pregnancy and STDs and STIs, and then they move on to talk about sex. Question number 2. Is sex assigned at birth? No, sex is not assigned at birth. Sex is determined at conception. At 2 XX chromosomes are for female, and XY determines a male. A doctor doesn't say, the last 3 babies were girls, so I will assign this one a boy. I encourage you not to use that phrase because it is neither medically nor biologically accurate. Question number 3. What are some of the consequences of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones? First, I'd like to point out that puberty is not a disease, but that is how it's being treated when we medically stop puberty and then reverse the effects of it with cross-sex hormones. We don't even know all of the long-term effects of this medical intervention and the impact on brain development. But what we do know is that puberty blockers are not even FDA approved to be used on this population. We also know that puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones cause permanent sterilization, and they carry a greater risk for heart disease, diabetes, osteoporosis, and cancer. Not to mention the cost of this medical intervention could be upwards to $2,000 per month per life. This is a grand experiment, and our children deserve better. I'm going to end where I began, with the children. The health and innocence of children is far too important for us to be passive. We need to engage in our own homes, and we need to engage in our community. Together, we can and will make a difference. Thank you.